Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna everyone, thank you for coming to the Śrimad Bhāgavatam class. I especially want to ask for the blessings from everyone and His Holiness Ram Govinda Swami to please bless me that I may say something that is pleasing to Krishna and purifying for all of us Vaishnavas. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasan Tato Jayamudirayet Nasta Prayasu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamas Loke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So we're reading from Śrimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25, Text 4. Shreyastvam katamad rajan karmanatma na ihase dukkahani sukha vapti Shreyastane hachesyate Shreyastvam katamad rajan Karmanatma na ihase Dukkahani sukha vapti Shreyastane hachesyate Shreyastvam katamad rajan Karmanatma na ihase Dukkahani sukha vapti Shreyastane hachesyate Shreyastvam katamad rajan Karmanatma na ihase Dukkahani sukha vapti Shreyastane hachesyate Shreyastvam katamad rajan ihase Dukkahani sukha vapti. Shreyasnaneha chesyate. Shreyasvam katamadrajan. Karmanatmana ihase. Dukkahani sukhavapti. Shreyasnaneha chesyate. Shreyasvam katamadrajan. Karmanatmana ihase. Dukkahani sukhavapti. Shreyasnaneha chesyate. Shreya, ultimate benediction. Tvam, you. Katamat, what is that? Rajan, O king. Karmana, by fruitive activities. Atmanaha, of the soul. Ihase, you desire. Dukkahani, disappearance of all distresses. Sukha avapti, attainment of all happiness. Shreya, benediction. Tat, that. Na, never. Iha, in this connection. Cha, and. Isyate, is available. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Narad Muni asked King Prachinabarishat, my dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. Purport. In this material world, there is a great illusion which covers real intelligence. A man in the mode of passion wants to work very hard to derive some benefit, but he does not know that time will never allow him to enjoy anything permanently. Compared with the work one expends, the gain is not so profitable. Even if it is profitable, it is not without its distresses. If a man is not born rich and he wants to purchase a house, cars, and other material things, he has to work hard day and night for many years in order to possess them. Thus, happiness is not attained without undergoing some distress. Actually, pure happiness cannot be had within this material world. If we wish to enjoy something, we must suffer for something else. On the whole, suffering is the nature of this material world, and whatever enjoyment we are trying to achieve is simply illusion. After all, we have to suffer the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. We may discover many fine medicines, but it is not possible to stop the sufferings of disease or death. Actually, medicine is not the counteracting agent for either disease or death. On the whole, there is no happiness in this material world, but an illusioned person works very hard for so-called happiness. Indeed, this process of working hard is actually taken for happiness. This is called illusion. Therefore, Narad Muni asked King Prachinabarishat what he desired to attain by performing so many costly sacrifices. Even if one attains a heavenly planet, he cannot avoid the distresses of birth, old age, disease, and death. Someone may argue that even devotees have to undergo many distresses in executing austerities and penances connected with devotional service. Of course, for the neophytes, the routine of devotional service may be very painful, but at least they have the hope that they will ultimately be able to avoid all kinds of distresses and achieve the highest perfectional stage of happiness. For the common karmis, there is no such hope, because even if they are promoted to the higher planetary systems, they are not guaranteed freedom from the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. Even Lord Brahma, who is situated in the highest planetary system, Brahma Loka, has to die. Lord Brahma's birth and death may be different from an ordinary man's, but within this material world, he cannot avoid the distresses of birth, old age, disease, and death. If one is at all serious about attaining liberation from these miseries, he must take to devotional service. This is confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mam eti Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Thus, after attaining full Krishna consciousness, the devotee does not return to this material world after death. He goes back home, back to Godhead. That is the perfect stage of happiness, unblemished by any trace of distress. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Kramakanana Swamini Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Gurudas Chaitanya Swamini Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pasati Adeshtarine. So, in context, we are reading the 4th canto of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, and we're at the beginning of the story of King Prachinabarhishat and his sons, the Prachetas. So in the previous chapter, King Prachinabarhishat, who comes in the lineage of Maharaj Uttanabad, he told his sons to marry and create progeny. So they underwent austerities for 10,000 years. And on the way to their austerities, they met Lord Shiva, who gave them some prayers to recite. And they recited these prayers by Lord Shiva, which is known as the Rudra Gita, while performing these austerities. Now, back home, while this was going on, their father, King Prachinabarhishat, was continuing as normal with his fruitive activities. So Narad Muni decided to have some mercy on him and to enlighten him in the actual goal of life. So in this verse, Narad Muni is actually beginning the story of the famous Puranjana, which is meant to be an allegory representing the soul, and Puranjana and how he enters the city of 9 gates, which represents the body. Now, Narad Muni's tactic here is to tell the story of King Prachinabarhishat's actual life without calling it out directly. So one thing he says in this verse is, the chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. And it's amazing because that is not intuitive for most people. Narad Muni is saying it like it's obvious. But for most people, we think that to gain actual happiness and to minimize our suffering and distress, we need to do material fruitive activity. That's the general consensus of the population. So it's really the opposite. Even though people think fruitive activity is going to increase our happiness and decrease our misery, it's the opposite happens. I was listening to a lecture by His Holiness Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Swami, where he summarizes it very nicely. He says that when we endeavor for material enjoyment, one of four things happen. The first thing is that we endeavor for material enjoyment and we don't get what we want, which means we'll be frustrated. The second thing that could happen is we endeavor for material enjoyment, we get what we want, but it doesn't make us happy. And then we're frustrated again. The third thing that could happen is we endeavor for material enjoyment, it makes us happy, but that happiness is very short, so we're frustrated again. And the fourth thing that can happen is we endeavor for material enjoyment, we get what we want, it makes us happy, but it brings with it all kinds of inconveniences and distresses, and therefore we are frustrated again. So all endeavors for material enjoyment will always lead to frustration. And Srila Prabhupada actually makes this point in the purport to this verse that even in devotional service, we undergo so much difficulty. So what to speak of the material world, in devotional service, we're also experiencing some distress connected with devotional service. And I think we can all relate to this quite well. At least when we first joined, we may have come with this idea that once I am doing devotional service, there will never be any other distress in my life. And then sometimes I know people who've actually had really peaceful, joyful lives before Krishna consciousness. And then when they come into Krishna consciousness, they're shocked that their whole life is turned upside down, and they just, there's innumerable miseries that come into their life, and they're wondering, how did this happen? We were happy before. And why does this happen? And it's because we're so used to that material conception of happiness, that if everything's going well in my life, then this must be happiness. And then you take up Krishna consciousness and things don't go according to our plan. Now they're going according to Krishna's plan. And therefore it requires some further purification on our part. But if we can't accept it, then we think that devotional service is the cause of our suffering. But actually it's not. Devotional service is the only way to get out of suffering. Srila Prabhupada says in this purport that at least devotees have the hope of getting out of this crazy world and attaining the highest happiness, which is eternal. Outside of devotional service, that opportunity is not present for anyone. This is the way to overcome, even though we encounter so much distress in devotional service too, this is the way to get out of it. So Narad Muni is trying to enlighten King Prachina Barishat, and this is the beginning of the story. So as the chapter unfolds, he'll speak about the story of Puranjana, which is representing the soul, and how Puranjana is traveling, wandering throughout the universe, everywhere, all over the world, looking for a place to stay and enjoy material happiness. And then eventually, and he's traveling with an unknown friend. He has a friend called Avigyata, who he doesn't know is there. And this represents the super soul. Krishna is always traveling with us, with the soul in our heart, but the soul is, in many cases, unaware that Krishna is there. And then Puranjana comes to the city of 9 gates, which is now representing the body with its 9 entrances, the 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the mouth, the 2 ears, the genitals, and the rectum. And in the city, it's described that there's walls, parks, towers, canals, windows, and these things represent the parts of the body. The walls represent the skin. The parks represent the hairs on the body, like trees. The towers represent the highest parts of the body, like the nose and the head. The canals represent the wrinkles, all the valleys in our body. The windows represent the eyes. And in the city, there's houses made of gold, silver, and iron. And these represent the 3 modes of material nature that we can be under the influence of in our body. And it's said that the capital of the city is the heart. Because in a capital, like the capital cities of the different countries, that's where all the plans are made. That's where all the, the politicians are, and they're making plans of how to progress the country. So in the same way, in our body, the capital city is the heart. And that's the center for making plans for material enjoyment. So the heart is making all these plans and getting attached to different things. So now Puranjana is he's wandering in the city, and then he comes across a woman, a very beautiful woman that he is bewildered by and immediately attracted to and immediately pursues for marriage. And this woman is said to represent the intelligence. And he said that this woman has a 5-hooded snake around her, and she's followed by 10 servants. And each of those 10 servants followed by innumerable women serving those 10 servants. So the woman is representing the intelligence of the living entity. And the 5-hooded snake is representing the vital force. It's said that the 5-hooded snake is always protecting the woman, even when she's asleep. And that's kind of like how our vital force, the air we breathe, it's always acting, even when we're asleep. Even when we're not acting, the air within us is moving. And the 10 servants of the woman, of the intelligence, are the 10 senses. And the innumerable women following those 10 servants are the innumerable desires that need to be fulfilled, that are associated with the 10 senses. So we have the woman, the intelligence, who is directing these 10 senses in material enjoyment. And then those followers of the 10 senses are now all the desires that need to be fulfilled. So, Sri Sri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So it's said that the living entity, the soul, Puranjana, gets so captivated by this woman, the intelligence, that when the woman walked, he walked. When she sat down, he sat down. When she ate, he ate. When she laughed, he laughed. He just copied everything that she did. And it sounds kind of funny. It's like the typical, whooped husband that we see in TV and modern life. But that's exactly what happens to the soul. Governed by a materially conditioned intelligence, the soul just goes along with whatever the intelligence points it to do. So the moral of the story, the whole story will be unfolded in the next 4 or 5 chapters. And the whole thing is basically the soul is engaged by the intelligence in sense gratification and entangled in all kinds of sinful activities, gets addicted to sex life, and basically until the soul is forced to leave the body, until the soul is kicked out of the city of 9 gates. And if one is very fortunate, one gets in touch with a bona fide spiritual master and then attains the actual goal of life. And that comes later on when Puranjana gets reborn in a different body. So we may ask the question, why did Narad Muni tell this long story to Prachina Barisat instead of just being straightforward? Because I have to be honest, when I was reading the Puranjana story, it's not obvious to me what's happening until I read Srila Prabhupada's purports. So it seems almost more complicated than just being direct and saying, you're wasting your life in sense gratification and you should, endeavor for the ultimate goal of life. But Srila Prabhupada says in one of the purports in the coming verses that Upadesho hi murkhanam parkopaya nashantaye. He's quoting Chanakya Pandit in the Niti Shastra, which says, if good instructions are given to a foolish rascal, he simply becomes angry and turns against the instructions instead of taking advantage of them. So Narad Muni, being the ideal example of a tactful preacher, is trying to get a message across to King Prachina Barishat without offending him, without being harsh or direct. And for us, one of the biggest lessons we can take from this whole story is that we need to be tactful in how we interact and how we communicate the message of Krishna consciousness to others. We have to be very careful. Sometimes we have this idea that we need to be direct and straightforward and sharp when we preach. And I feel like it's almost a rite of passage when we join Krishna consciousness to go through a fanatical phase. I don't know if there's people out there who haven't, but I feel like almost everybody has. They go through this fanatical phase where it's like, we have to tell the truth as it is, exactly the way Srila Prabhupada said it. And if we don't mature out of that at some point, it can be quite dangerous for us. Like, we can fall flat on our faces, not just in our preaching, but in our spiritual life entirely. But we have this attraction to being sharp and direct, and sometimes it's just because we want to feel superior over others. It's a way to exert our superiority over others. Like, I know something you don't know, and therefore I can be sharp and direct and straightforward. And we justify it by saying, well, we have to give the absolute truth. We have to give it directly. But direct preaching like that only works if the intention is totally pure. So if you look at Srila Prabhupada's example, he could say anything to anyone, and it would be accepted and taken in the correct mood, because Srila Prabhupada's intention was totally pure in his preaching. He wasn't trying to exert superiority over anyone else. He often said he's the servant. Like, he feels like he's the servant of his disciples. So we are not on that level where our intention is pure. Maybe we have some intention for the benefit of the other person. But there's also, because we are filled with ego, false ego, we also have that need to be better, need to be superior. And that also comes out like this. Srila Prabhupada didn't have that. His entire mood was for the benefit of the other person. That's it. So we have to be tactful in how we preach. And it doesn't mean that we need to water down our philosophy or now start tiptoeing and not giving the full story. It just means that we need to share the message of Krishna consciousness in a more mindful way so that it doesn't offend people. Don't we have the experience that it's easier to hear good advice if one does not feel attacked directly, right? People are much more sensitive now. And that's another topic to discuss, because we may look at the past and see how things were done in the past, but we have to be appropriate to the current context. And it is true that people are much more sensitive. When we were reading this chapter when I was at Bhaktivedanta Manor in the ladies' ashram, we did daily reading for 1 hour. And it was so nice to be in a group and discuss. And one of the things that came up is that people are more sensitive now. It's just something we've noticed. And I was reflecting on that and trying to figure out exactly what's that about. Is that a problem that people are more sensitive, emotionally sensitive? But I was listening to a lecture by His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami, where he was talking about how just as our physical body is conditioned in different ways, our subtle body is also conditioned in different ways. It's just a subtle conditioning. So just as someone may have a very strong, athletic, fit body that never gets sick, and then I may have a fragile, weak body that gets sick every time the season or weather changes. That's just how the body is conditioned. So in the same way, the subtle body is conditioned differently for different people. One may be naturally having a very joyful disposition. One may naturally be more critical, more, sulky. And sometimes some may have a more resilient subtle body. That means they have greater emotional strength. They can go through anything, it doesn't affect them. And others may be more sensitive, and therefore everything affects them. So it's not really something to fix per se. It's not really something we can judge, because it's probably not going to change. Like we can say Krishna consciousness, the process of Krishna consciousness can help greatly, but sometimes it may not be able to change our subtle body entirely, and our physical body. It's like saying, if I practice Krishna consciousness, maybe one day I'll have an athletic body, That's just not going to change. I have what I have. This is my karma that's come with this life. So sometimes our subtle body also may not be able to change and become less sensitive or less, affected by everything and more resilient, even though that is something that we work towards. We definitely work towards resilience in a spiritual sense. We try to gain that spiritual nourishment such that it makes us more resilient. But that's a long process. And then also with the sensitivity, we see that a lot of it is environmental and social conditioning of this time also. Like if we look at our parents' generation, a lot of the issues we have today were not there in the past. And I just think of the way my mom grew up in community, surrounded by her cousins, her parents and all their siblings and all their children. There was natural community, so there was no loneliness. All these mental health issues of today weren't so prevalent then. Maybe they were there, but due to the force of community, they didn't feel lonely, and therefore they could naturally move through the difficulties of life in that kind of community. Whereas, so there was natural community. Whereas now we have this false community of social media. We have everybody living isolated from each other in loneliness. And then we have the false community of social media where we think that if we have 1,000 friends on Facebook, they're all our community. And everything I share, to my community on Facebook is going to be well supported and well received by my community. And the truth is, it's just not. I was looking at my Facebook, I have 1,000 friends, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily need to share my entire life, my journey, my successes, my struggles with all these different people, and that they'll necessarily be happy or supportive to me. So it's not a real community. And therefore, there's loneliness, there's this, mental health, our mental state is so different from the way it was, and therefore there's this extra hypersensitivity we have because we're affected by everything we see. Like social media, the generation we're in is like walking around with a loudspeaker, It's like, imagine if people were walking through the streets with a loudspeaker just telling you every single thing that's on their mind. That's actually what we're exposed to now in social media. And we're not actually meant to be exposed to that. We're not actually meant to consume the successes and failures and traumas and of thousands of people that we see. It's just not, we don't have the mental capacity for it. So that could be contributing to our emotional and mental sensitivity. The low self-esteem we feel from seeing the successes of others versus our failures. So much, so there's a whole environmental situation surrounding this. And I mean, people can do social studies about it and, try and figure out what's happening with people's mental state in this day and age. But what we need to take from it is that because people are more sensitive, we have to now adjust to be able to be relevant and relatable to this generation. So we have the example of Lord Chaitanya and how he was preaching to Prakashananda Saraswati with humility and sensitivity. I was listening to a lecture by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu where he gave such a beautiful definition of humility. He said that humility means to not let our ego come in the way of our purpose, which is such a nice definition, because sometimes we think humility means that we need to put ourselves down or, seem lower and have low self-esteem. But it actually just means that our ego, we don't let it come in the way of our purpose. And he said that sensitivity means that to be aware of how our actions affect the emotions of others and to be willing to adjust and modify our actions so that we can avoid negative responses and hopefully bring about positive responses from other people. And we see in the case of Lord Chaitanya and Prakashananda Saraswati, Prakashananda Saraswati was the head of the Mayavadis at Varanasi. So, he's the most important person there. He's like the biggest preacher there of Mayavad philosophy. Now, Lord Chaitanya is God. He is the supreme personality of Godhead. He can defeat anyone and he can do anything. So he could go to Prakashananda Saraswati and just give it straight, defeat him straightforwardly. But he understood that this is a respectable person and it's going to be difficult for him to just accept what I say. If Lord Chaitanya went straight forward and directly, he was thinking maybe he wouldn't take it. Even though he's God, he can make, anything can happen. He can do anything. But to set the example of how we should be in our dealings, he accepted a lower position. Lord Chaitanya sat where everyone was washing their feet, so it's considered to be like an unclean place. He sat on the floor, and then he exhibited his effulgence, his beauty. And we know Mayavadis are attracted to the effulgence, so they naturally were attracted to Lord Chaitanya's beauty in this way. And then they noticed him, and then Prakashananda Saraswati took his hand and said, "Why are you sitting there? Please come sit up here," and gave him an elevated seat. Now that was his Agyata Sukriti. That was Lord Chaitanya giving Prakashananda Saraswati the opportunity to get some Agyata Sukriti, some unknown spiritual benefit, by offering him a seat. And by appreciating his humility, and offering him a seat. And then from there, he was able, because of that mercy and unknown spiritual benefit, he was able to then receive the message of what Lord Chaitanya was trying to say by inquiring from him submissively, and then Lord Chaitanya was speaking submissively. So this whole pastime, and the way Lord Chaitanya dealt with everyone, like even Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he's also a Mayavadi. But Lord Chaitanya, instead of coming out and preaching directly and straightforwardly and defeating him, he sat and listened to him for 7 days without speaking. He was patient, he was tolerant, and he listened to this philosophy for 7 days before he was given the opportunity to speak, and then he calmly defeated the Mayavad philosophy. So we have these examples as something for us to follow. And something Chaitanya Charan Prabhu said, that us adjusting is actually we're making people emotionally comfortable so that they can accept a spiritual message. That's what this is doing. We shouldn't make it difficult for people to hear a message. And he gave the example of how, like, let's say you're in a room with people who are just used to warm weather, and they from hot climates, and you're giving a Bhagavad Gita class, and you turn the temperature way down, and it's freezing in the room. You turn the AC on, and it's absolutely cold. Now, and you're giving the Bhagavad Gita class. Now, all these people who are used to hot weather are going to be uncomfortable physically, and they're going to be focusing more on how uncomfortable they're feeling than even listening to the lecture. So in that way, we're making it difficult for people to hear the message because they are physically uncomfortable. So in the same way, we shouldn't make it difficult for people to receive the message by making them emotionally uncomfortable. We should try to keep them emotionally comfortable so that they can now hear the message. And particularly with influential people, like Prakashananda Saraswati was influential. Here, King Prashina Barishat was influential. These are all leaders of society. You cannot go up to them and criticize them directly and tell them, you're wasting your life. Srila Prabhupada has this quote in a letter to Balavanta from December 1972 in Ahmedabad that says, "Now I want that we shall recruit more and more our men amongst the intelligent class of men. They, because they are little educated, or they have got some wealth or fame or ability, so they will be sometimes little puffed up, but that is all right, they deserve it. Now we shall have to learn the art how to approach such high class of men and attract them to apply themselves to this Krishna consciousness process of self-realization. That requires much tact, and we shall have to expect to meet all challenges by sharp minds. But if we remain always absorbed in remembering Lord Chaitanya, how he converted so many intelligent men, even sitting for 3 days and nights to hear them speak without himself speaking anything, and if we remember how Krishna was so much patient to explain everything to Arjuna, even Arjuna was speaking like a fool. In this way, being always tolerant of others and appreciating their points of view, it will be an easy matter for us to convince them gradually to join us." So in this letter, Srila Prabhupada is not saying, well, to hell with their opinions. They are influential, but we don't care. We will give it to them straight. He's saying, we shall have to learn the art how to approach such higher class of men and attract them to apply themselves to Krishna consciousness. So that means it's our responsibility and our duty to adjust to them. And there's no one size fits all of how we can do it. It's not like we can sit here and discuss how can we be sensitive to the current climate, because that's always going to change. That's one thing about the world that we see. everything is constantly changing. That's the only constant. So it's going to come up again and again. We're going to have to constantly adjust our approaches according to the time, place, and circumstance and the mentality of the people. And we see in our scriptures so many different incarnations have come, so many different messengers have come. We had Lord Buddha coming to reject the Vedas. We had Sankaracharya coming, Lord Shiva coming as Sankaracharya to accept the Vedas, but actually start Mayavad philosophy. So we have all these different teachers who are coming for the current climate of what people can take at that time. So now we, in the spirit of Srila Prabhupada, have to do the same, because Prabhupada did that. He went to the West, and according to the time, place, and circumstance, he made Krishna consciousness accessible to the people of the Western world. There's so many things that, if Prabhupada kept it exactly the same as it was in India, nobody would have joined. There was this one lecture I was listening to recently where someone was asking Prabhupada if he, someone was saying there's so many rules, and Prabhupada said, well, you should see what I left out. You should see what I didn't bring to the West, because that's even more. So we have to be flexible in our thinking, as we are now the younger generation, and then there's going to be so many more younger generations. We have to have that flexibility to adjust. And just in general, I was reflecting on how we have to be tactful in our communication in general, not just preaching the message, because the truth is that all of our communication is our preaching on some level. When we communicate at work, when we communicate as parents to our children, when we communicate in school, when we are students, and how we communicate with other people, it's all giving a stance. There's a stance that we're giving off. Our overall stance that we're presenting when we enter a room. How do people feel? If there is a change in how people feel, it should be positive. We shouldn't enter a room and people think, oh, this person again. So it's what we give off. Our stance is what we give off, our energy. And that is our preaching. I was thinking of one godbrother I have, Tulsi Prabhu, and he preaches so much before he even speaks. Like St. Francis of Assisi said, we should preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. And I was thinking, particularly this godbrother, there's so many amazing devotees, but he just, with his aura, with his joyful nature, with how he treats people, with how he just welcomes everyone, that is all the preaching you need sometimes. And and he's an expert teacher, but before he even teaches, he's already preached. He's already, everyone already loves him. Everyone already wants to join him because of his nature. And it's like the 6 Goswamis. We have in the Sat Goswami Ashtakam, Dira Dira Jana Priyo Priyakaro, Nirmatsaro Pujito. So the 6 Goswamis were popular with both the gentle and the ruffians because they were not envious of anyone. So that's something to meditate on for all of us, that to be popular with the gentle and the ruffians is difficult. To be popular with anybody these days is very difficult. But especially the gentle and the ruffians. That means, loved by everybody. And that happens when we're non-envious. It's saying there in the prayer, we're non-envious because we're not committing offenses to anyone. When we're envious, that's when we commit offenses. That's when we criticize. That's when we find fault. And that's just something I was recently reflecting on, just due to many different, things going on in the world, different experiences, that we need to tread gently on this earth, tread gently in our dealings with whoever. And that's what we're learning from this, to be gentle. The Vaishnava is a gentleman. So to be careful not to offend others. We see that sometimes, like I was speaking about how on social media we have like a loudspeaker where we just, blurting out every single thing that goes through our mind. And sometimes we say, it's freedom of speech, I can do what I want. It's my public profile. I can say whatever I want. And that may be true. But think about people walking around in public naked. Would you go through the streets of Durban naked? you can say, well, it's my body, I can do whatever I want. But in most countries, you get arrested for doing something like that because it's causing a disturbance to the public atmosphere. So even though, in the same way on social media, we have our, it's my profile, I can say what I want, but it is a public space. It's a space where other people are affected by what we're doing, what we're saying. And we have to really be very reflective of what is our intention. Is our intention to share? Is our intention to uplift? Or is our intention to, just bring the energy down, bring the overall mood down? Because that is our preaching. That's what, what we bring to the table is our preaching, and on every level, in every atmosphere. So I was thinking of Vaisheshika Prabhu, who says that at the time of initiation, actually, he asks his disciples, along with the regulative principles, to vow not to criticize devotees, especially on the internet, because he knows how damaging that is to everyone. It's damaging to the spiritual life of the person criticizing, and it hurts the people who are listening, hearing, reading. So tread gently with everyone, not just in preaching, but in our own community, in our own little circles that we have of life. And because Vaishnav Sangha is sacred, it's the best thing there is. We should be grateful for the opportunity. We should be very grateful to just be in the association of devotees. And I think something I'm thinking of is, like, recently I found out, just a few days ago actually, I found that one of my friends that I went to university with was murdered. And it was very intentional murder. It wasn't like a robbery where someone got shot. It was like somebody intended to kill him. They didn't take anything, they didn't steal anything, they just went there, killed him. And I was remembering, he wasn't the easiest person to be around. We all at university, we tried to avoid, to be honest. But, nobody deserves that. And I was thinking of how, if you're in the wrong circle and we're putting off bad energy, then, some crazy things could happen. Like, somebody could actually have justified that in their head, that it's okay to do that. I mean, we all tolerated this person. We said, oh, okay, what can we do? We weren't going to do something bad like that. But you don't know what's out there, There's crazy people out there. That means if we're putting off some kind of agitating energy, we actually don't know what could happen. So that's just like for our own safety physically, to tread gently in our dealings. But then also especially in the community of Vaishnavas, because that is, that's actually more dangerous than even physically being harmed, is to harm our spiritual health. Because we learn that when you cause offenses, it actually stops our spiritual development in one sense. It said it's like held in abeyance. It's like our spiritual bank account is there, but everything's frozen, and you can't access the assets from the spiritual bank account. So these are some reflections just on tact, being tactful and sensitive, which actually is mostly for myself, because I was reflecting all on how I don't do any of this, so I need to try. And so I'll end there, and we can have any discussion or comments, questions from anybody. Just a few minutes.
Hare Krishna, Surabhi. Thank you so much. I was thinking about the quote about humility is not say it again?
It's to not let our ego get in the way of our purpose.
Yeah, but I was reflecting that sometimes when I'm too fixed on my purpose, then I can also not be humble. And I was thinking another definition could also be is to just not let anything get away in the flow of mercy.
That's such a beautiful definition.
Because my purpose is to make 5,000 cupcakes, but but then humility, my idea of humility may get skewed, but sometimes it's just not to obstruct the flow of mercy. And I really just to appreciate the definition of, the idea of how you're presenting preaching and how every aspect of what we do adds to that. I just genuinely appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think in that lecture with Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, where he spoke about not letting my ego get in the way of my purpose, I think it was less about my purpose and like the purpose, of like the purpose of Lord Chaitanya was to preach, preach the chanting of Hare Krishna. So that's not like, he's God, so his purpose is the purpose. But for us, our purpose, it's true. My purpose may not be Krishna's purpose. I have to align my purpose with like the overall, the purpose of Srila Prabhupada, the purpose of this movement, and then not let my ego get in the way of that, not just my own individual purpose. It's true, if we have a materially motivated purpose, then, or even a seemingly spiritually motivated purpose, but then it's like underlying with, ego or something. Like you were speaking about the 5,000 cupcakes, it's like spiritual, but is it really? It's, yeah, that's nice. Anything else? It's 8:30, so we can end. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande.